Hello, I'm Donal McCauley, and welcome to medicsvoices.com, where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today we're in Austria, and I'm talking to Florian Stigler. Now, Florian, you've really done some really exciting, dynamic things in general practice communication, but I'd like to take you back to the very, very beginning. What got you interested in medicine?
What got me interested in medicine? I remember it. I was 14 years old and I was kind of excited about running. I think because my father was also excited about running, and I was stumbling about one book from from an Olympic coach from New Zealand. And I was reading this book. I enjoyed it, and was a bit about the physiology. And I think this got me interested about this biological aspect of medicine. And I think this was one of the main aspects. And then I had some people who inspired me. I remember I was at the party when I was kind of 16, and a friend had a sister, and she had a boyfriend who was a medical student, and he was a very positive, enthusiastic young guy. And I think he was an inspiration for me as well. So he was working hard but enjoying life at the same time. And I think this was something I was looking up somehow. And 3 or 4 months before medical school started, I made my decision. So it was a tough decision in the beginning. But yeah, here I am many years later.
So then you went to medical school. Tell us about your experience in medical school. Did it live up to all your expectations?
I think it was a special experience because we were changing. I was the first person or the first cohort in a very different system, which made it a bit difficult because we did not really know what we can expect because we were the first year in every stage. And then I remember after the first year when I was working in the hospital, I had my first kind of medical career crisis where I thought, I don't want to work in the hospital. And I was thinking, oh my God, did I make the wrong decision? And but then I was continuing and I was ending up in a medical student organization, the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. It's like a big global organization all over the world. And I was really getting enthusiastic about it. I love to organize things, which I still like to do today. So I think it was also the foundation for my later career. And I got in contact with public health, which was something which was very unsexy for me in the beginning. This is really boring about smoking and obesity. But then I kind of became the local public health officer and I was doing projects in this and I started to love it. And I ended up being the public health director of the whole organization in the end. And then I was doing also my public health training, which influenced me. And my public health training was mainly always about primary care and family medicine, about the systems perspective, about how we can change and improve our primary care systems. So it was also a bit about coincidences when I look back now. Yeah.
Well, let me take you back to your medical student days because you talk about your involvement with organizations, but it wasn't just involvement. You were a really dynamic influence in a number of different organizations. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think always since 20 years, I was always involved in some voluntary work. So in the beginning, it was the medical students organizations where I had a lot of passion, but I think this was more of a thing of learning and seeing where my boundaries are and learning new skills. I think we were believing we were changing the world, but in the end, we were kind of more talking with each other, which was fine. But then I was getting involved with the Young Family Doctors organization in Austria, which was also an interesting thing because I remember I was once the Secretary General of this Young Doctors Association in Austria, but we had 4 members. So we had a meeting of our whole organization in one living room, and we decided who is the president, and I was said, okay, I will be the Secretary General. And but today it's a very active organization. So each year they have a meeting with 150 participants. So they are very active. So they were growing since then quite well. And yeah, and I think then this time was over, and then I was getting involved with different fora and different ways of bringing people together. But this idea of bringing people together and having conversations was also something which started back then, I think. Yeah.
So then you qualified and you trained essentially in general practice to begin with. Tell us a little bit about the process of training and what it was like in Austria at that time.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, I graduated. Then I was doing my master's in public health for 1 year, which was an online master. I remember it was a bit boring sitting at home the whole time. And then the training in Austria, I was still part of the kind of old training, so the system changed in the meantime. It was mainly a hospital-based training, so it was shorter than in other countries. It was not called a specialty afterwards, and it would have been possible to finish it only working in the hospital. I choose to work in the GP office for half a year at the beginning and also for a half a year in the end, but this was my own choice. And this was a good experience for me, but the training itself was also very tough, I have to say. So this was not the most fun experience of my life, I have to say. And yeah, we're not, Austria is probably not the best country for teaching and training in many aspects. But I think this was something I experienced there. But for me, the lucky thing was always that I was kind of also living somehow in the UK with my mind and also living in the United States with my mind. So I think a lot of my further influences were also coming from other countries. But the training was quite hard, but I think or hope it improved so far. So now it's longer. It's mandatory to work also in family medicine, which I deeply believe is very important, especially for family doctors in the end. And yeah, this was this time.
So you're talking there about your interest in public health, and you talked
Mhm,
very interestingly about your mind being in the UK. And then you went and did a doctorate in the UK with Nick Mays, who's a world-renowned
mhm.
expert in health services research. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, for me, it was amazing. I mean, I remember it's a long story. For me, my mind was going to these countries because there's so much knowledge and history and engagement and so many people working on public health or primary care or both, which is just not that existent in Austria. So in Austria, the first master of public health was introduced a bit more than 20 years ago. So we didn't even have a master's education. Now we have a public health community, so it's growing, but we are still looking up to those countries. And I remember when I was doing my doctorate, when I was around 30, I was living in London also for 1 year. This was definitely my most exciting time. I mean, I was going to lectures almost every evening. I was where I belonged, and I just learned a lot. So I, I think I was kind of a research mind before as well, but of course I learned much more about research. And yeah, it was an exciting time. But I also have to say I also had a strong mentor in Austria who was called Martin Sprenger. He was kind of the head of this first public health school in Austria, who was also interested in primary care. So with him, I also had many discussions over many years about public health, also from a different perspective, from a very broad perspective of looking at public health from as many perspectives as possible all the time, which was a bit different in the UK. In the UK, you had world-leading experts usually on one topic. So I'm also happy that I was trained with such a generalist approach because I think I would also consider myself as a kind of a generalist now. And yeah, but the UK was very important for my professional development in many ways, of course.
Well, the subject of your doctorate is very topical at the moment.
Yes, and I think it fitted also very well to Austria, to the situation which is going on in Austria, and because my topic was in general, I would say about primary care in Austria, but I had different studies. In one study, I was comparing diabetes care in primary care in Austria with the UK, which was really interesting because those two countries are so different. Then I was analyzing the family doctors shortage in Austria with a qualitative research method. So I had many interviews with many different experts from different perspectives, which was really, really interesting. And yeah, and also my master thesis was interesting in this way. So I was kind of replicating the study Barbara Starfield did internationally in the past. So I did it again in Austria, so I could compare it with her data. And it was the first study which showed in Austria that we have a weak primary care system. And then Dion Gringos from Nivelle came with this big European study, which confirmed, yes, Austria has a weak primary care system. And so decision makers were becoming aware of this issue and they were really initiating a reform afterwards. I think it had many influences, not just those two studies. But it was interesting to see that the reform was starting 10 years ago and it's still going on very actively until today. And I think my doctorate and my research was really helpful in this way. And also this family doctors shortage is of course an issue not just for Austria but also internationally. We also did a study of what you can do against it, and we found 95 measures. So yeah, it was a lot I learned, but I think also the general skills were important because now I do also a bit of editing like you. In some way, I have my own family medicine newsletter, so also these skills are really helpful for different projects as well.
So you've done your doctorate and now you're back in Austria. Tell us now about your current career and how it's developed.
Yeah, yeah. In the last years, I think I was staying with this approach, which I kind of would like to keep. That part-time I'm working as a doctor, and part-time I'm working as a researcher slash manager who is interested in primary care, also on a systems level, who wants to support primary care reform. And I still have my side projects, which are voluntary projects. And yeah, this is how it developed in the past year. So I was working as a general practitioner with a focus on preventive medicine in Graz, in a health center in Graz. And then I was working in the family medicine department to do research. And now I work in the Austrian Public Health Institute, where I soon will work also as the scientific officer to improve the research quality in this institute. So I think I still have my different roles of being a doctor, being a researcher or a research mind in some ways, and I still want to do my organizational work to be kind of a manager.
So there are three components. There's the clinical work, there's your
Mhm,
academic work. So tell us a little bit more about that academic work before we move on to your other
mhm.
programs.
Yeah, yeah, I would say as a researcher, I think I always had my research interest when I was already 15. Then I had my research training. I did my scientific studies. I got them published. I got some opinion pieces published also in the major journals and things like this. And I was working as a normal researcher for some time. But I think maybe in the last 5 years before COVID, this kind of stopped. So I was kind of switching roles in this way. And I think for me, this is kind of fine because somehow I see myself as a researcher. But I remember was once my professor who was leading the family medicine department once told me, "You are actually kind of a medical journalist in some way." And I remember I was a bit angry about what she said or when she said it. But I think actually she was completely right. I think I am more of a research journalist than I'm really the researcher like you would see classically, because I just enjoy much more to read an exciting study and to summarize it and to communicate it to other people. This is kind of much more satisfying for me than sitting there working for 2 or 3 years of collecting data, of analyzing data, of writing up the articles. So I think I changed my role in this way, which fits to my blog and to my newsletter really, really well. And yeah, but so this was a switch, I think, more in the mind than in reality, because I think I needed those years of becoming kind of a proper researcher to be aware of the principles behind it and the quality standards and things like this.
You're still involved in a number of political organizations, the Young
Yes.
GPs of Austria. Tell us about that continued
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, with the young GPs, I'm not involved anymore. I'm not allowed to be involved with them, I'm told now. But with the political world, I still have a chair of a global forum of universal health coverage and primary healthcare, which is a very interesting thing. So this is connecting almost 600 international leaders from 80 countries, where we try to learn from each other and to influence each other, and sometimes about research, sometimes about political work and policy work. And in Austria, since 4 years, I'm involved in the Austrian Public Health Institute, where we support the primary healthcare reform in Austria. So, since 10 years, we have a new reform in Austria because we had single handed GPs only in Austria. And 10 years ago, we had this idea of starting interdisciplinary primary healthcare teams, which was a huge reform, a difficult reform. It needed new laws, it needed the support of different stakeholders, and it was starting very, very slowly. But it still has momentum. It's even growing much faster than in the beginning, also thanks to money by the European Commission. So we got 100 million euros to fund half of these new buildings. And this is a very exciting reform which is still going on. And we are a team of around, let's say, maybe 10 people who are doing different projects of supporting this reform. So in this way, I'm really involved in this, also these technical aspects of the Austrian primary healthcare reform. I would say that's probably the main thing at the moment. In the past, I was very active concerning tobacco control from a political perspective. But yeah, that's a different story, I guess. Yeah. Mhm.
Now let's talk about a really exciting component of your work, and that's your work in the communication of
Mhm.
evidence-based medicine, primary care, and harnessing the expertise that's there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was now starting a family medicine newsletter, which is called the Golden Nuggets of Family Medicine, where I send out newsletters for family doctors, where I try to include only the most exciting and useful information in a very compact way, because um, I believe in email somehow. I believe this is still a communication tool which is really, really relevant because everyone is reading emails. But I kind of hate newsletters because newsletters are usually long and boring, and I don't even open them because I know they are long and boring. But I really deeply believe that it can be completely different. And from the feedback so far, I think I achieved this. So I've only put every sentence in the email is really something I believe it's necessary and exciting or news or useful. And it got a lot of traction so far. So I started it really 1 year ago, almost by the day. But the idea is kind of 10 years old. So when I was back in London, I had similar ideas about this, but then I had to finish my doctorate. I had to finish my training to become a GP and things like this. But now I had the time again. And now I really got it started. And for me, this is now a very exciting part of my work life. So it takes a lot of time, but I'm excited about it. I have almost 2,600 subscribers now after 1 year, and it's growing daily. So it has really a good traction and progress. And I hope one day that I can also make this kind of my part-time job, because I hope one day I can organize an online conference for family doctors to have also some kind of revenue so that I will be able to get paid for what I'm doing one day. So this is the plan about it. And it's kind of really, I found my niche with this because I love reading these research studies. I love to summarize them. I love the layout thing with the homepage. I like this marketing approach of thinking about how can it be sent to more GPs and things like this. I like this organizational aspect. So, and I believe in this. So I believe there is change which is possible from a top-down perspective, talking to politicians or journalists about how primary healthcare should change. But I believe change is also possible with talking with the individual GPs themselves. And I think this is a great platform and I think it gives them inspiration. And it's mainly about clinical aspects, of course, because family doctors are also more interested in clinical research studies. But from time to time, I'm also trying to include some policy issues and some reform issues to bring some inspiration to this field. And yeah, I believe it's still in the very beginning. It's now 1 year old. It's still growing. It's still a growing community in many, many different countries all over the world already. But I believe it can be something really more useful, something bigger. And I think that one day it can also have funding that I maybe have even some employees to make it even more effective. And yeah, I'm loving it. It's kind of a startup at the moment.
Now, my final question is a slightly unusual question because as we were chatting, I see behind you there's a sign that says, live a good life. Tell us, what do you mean by live a good life?
Um, I would say it's probably a mix of pleasure and meaning. And I think the good thing about medicine and family medicine is that it can give you both. There's a lot of meaning involved. We can really make a difference, no matter if we are working with patients or on the systems level about the reform. And I think especially with patients, there's a lot of pleasure involved as well. I think every doctor knows this feeling. You can have a bad day, you see a handful of patients and you're feeling great and you are enjoying life. And yeah. And I think it's also about doing what you really love and what's inside you. And for me, it took some time to find my niche, but I can tell everyone don't give up, but really be persistent and don't stop before you found it.
Florian, thank you very much indeed for sharing so much of your life, your career, your enthusiasm, and your commitment to the future of family medicine. Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for you as well for your great initiative. Mhm.